The house with the blue door always looked peaceful from the outside. Flowers lined the walkway, and birds often perched on the rusting gate. Neighbors admired its well-painted exterior and neat hedges, assuming the family inside mirrored the charm of their home. But inside, the air was thick with tension, the kind that made the walls feel too close, the silence too loud, and each creak of the floorboards feel like a warning. Amara was 16 when she began to understand that not all homes were safe. Her father, known in the community as a respectable businessman and a strong church elder, was a different person behind closed doors. He wielded his authority like a weapon. His anger was unpredictable, his words laced with venom, and his hands faster than thought. He could smile in the market, shake hands with neighbors, and still come home ready to shatter plates over trivial things. Her mother, Sade, once bright and full of laughter, had grown quieter with each passing year. She moved like a shadow in her own home, careful not to disturb the sleeping lion. Her voice had lost its melody, reduced to whispers and mumbles. The scars she bore weren't always visible, but they spoke volumes. Amara's younger brother, Toby, often hid in the storage closet during fights, hugging a pillow and covering his ears. He was only 10, yet his eyes held the kind of sadness children weren't meant to carry. He had stopped asking why Papa shouted or why Mama cried. He just wanted it to stop. Every day, Amara walked to school with her head down. She wore long sleeves even in the dry season, a small price to pay for covering the bruises on her arms. Her teachers often said she was bright, but distant. Friends came and went, confused by her hesitance to invite anyone over or even speak about her family. One evening, when the shouting became unbearable, Amara slipped out and sat on the front porch. The cool breeze offered momentary relief from the heat inside. The streetlights flickered in familiar rhythms, and the air smelled of roasted maize from a nearby vendor. Her neighbor, Kelechi, a boy 2 years older, had seen her there more than once. He didn't ask questions. He only sat nearby in silence, offering a quiet presence. Sometimes, that was all Amara needed. They never spoke about the obvious. But their silence was a form of understanding. Days turned into months. The violence in the house escalated. One night, Sade had a cut above her eye that wouldn't stop bleeding. Amara helped her clean it with trembling hands. The helplessness was a heavy blanket draped over them all. Toby, now 11, asked a question that pierced the night like a blade. Will Papa ever love us enough not to hurt us? No one had an answer. The school counselor, Ms. Adimi, had long suspected something was wrong. Amara's withdrawn nature, sudden weight loss, and constant fatigue were signs. One afternoon, she gently pulled Amara aside after class. There was no pressure, only concern. You're not alone, she said softly. If you ever need help, I'm here. It took weeks, but eventually, Amara spoke. In a whisper that barely reached the air, she told her story. The rage, the fear, the bruises. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice didn't shake. What followed was a slow, painful process. Authorities were involved. There were interviews, social workers, and awkward silences at school. Her father denied everything. He painted Amara as a troubled teen trying to shame her family. But evidence doesn't lie. The bruises, the medical records, and eventually, Toba's testimony, all pointed to the truth. Her father was arrested. The community was shocked. The man they had respected, the man who led prayers and helped fund school events, was exposed. The aftermath was not magical. It was messy. Sade battled guilt, shame, and depression. She often blamed herself for not leaving sooner. Amara spent time in therapy, where she learned that healing wasn't linear. Toby cried at night stars, asking if they could ever go back to being a normal family. But with time, peace began to bloom where chaos once ruled. They moved to a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Sade found work as a seamstress. Amara excelled in school, later receiving a scholarship to study psychology, determined to help others like her. Kelechi remained in her life. Their friendship deepened, rooted in shared silence and mutual respect. He never tried to fix her, only held space for her healing. Years later, Amara stood before a room filled with young girls and women at a domestic abuse awareness seminar. She spoke of strength, resilience, and the power of breaking the cycle. When homes aren't safe anymore, she said, her voice firm yet warm, we build new ones, with honesty, love, and courage. And sometimes, those homes start with ourselves. And in the crowd, Sade and Toby sat in the front row, their eyes filled with pride. The past hadn't disappeared, but they no longer lived in fear of it. They had turned their pain into purpose, and their silence into strength. Because sometimes, survival is the beginning of the most beautiful story of all. And this was theirs.